Hey there guys, how you doing? So, at this point, we know what the Switch's launch looks like. Yes, smaller indie titles have been trickling in since the big presentation, but we know that those aren't what sell systems. Big first-party games are what sell Nintendo systems, and in that regard, the Switch's launch could be better. Zelda is as good a launch game as you could ever want, and to me it looks like it could very well be the single coolest Nintendo game ever produced. But it's got two problems. One, it's also going to be on the Wii U, so that gives 14 million people a potential excuse to hold off on buying a Switch until later. Two, it looks amazing, but it's just one game. People who aren't into Zelda aren't buying a Switch at launch, period. 1-2 Switch and Bomberman certainly look fun, but system sellers they ain't if you ask me. Then of course, the rest of the year could also be better. As far as first party goes, it's Mario Kart about 2 months after launch, Splatoon several months after that, and Mario Odyssey near the end of the year. I have no doubt that Mario Kart at least could have been ready for launch, but it feels like Nintendo took that first handful of titles and stretched them out over the calendar to avoid the dreaded first-year drought that has plagued many of the company's systems. The launch situation is just a bit less than we hoped for, and I can see that a lot of people have been pretty put off by it. The Wii U, and to a somewhat lesser extent the 3DS, have seen such a huge drop in quality games over the last year that most of us were expecting the Switch to just explode onto the scene with all those millions of games that Nintendo's obviously been working on all this time. But even though that very much is not happening, yet at least, I think that there just might be a method to this madness. Recently, the idea that Nintendo was giving the Switch a soft launch emerged. And I'm bummed because I came up with this idea like a month ago and I didn't get this out in time to beat everyone to the punch, and I had to rewrite this part of the script. Anyway, well, strictly by definition, this is not a soft launch per se, but I think the strategy and the end results might be similar. If you don't know what the term means, here's a quick illustration. A soft opening is when a business or a website or something like that opens its doors, as it were, whenever they're ready to, without making a big fuss out of it. They spend a while getting things rolling, drumming up some business, really getting a foothold in the market, and then they have an official grand opening at a later date. At that point, they have a lot more momentum, and their grand opening ends up potentially being much bigger than it would have been. A soft launch of a product is basically the same. A product has a limited release, or at least a quiet one, then officially launches to considerably more fanfare somewhere down the road after it's already gathered some steam. It's an interesting marketing strategy that's grown in popularity over the years, as it tends to turn up good results. Before I get on with my point, I'd like to look at a little history, namely the first year of the 3DS. Based on the success of the DS and on the strong initial reaction to the system, Nintendo released it in March of 2011 with no real standout launch titles and with a hefty $250 price tag. A few million Nintendo mega fans turned up and bought one at launch, but after that, sales plummeted and it failed to meet Nintendo's expectations for the first quarter. If you were watching the industry at the time, you'll know that it was a downright dire time for the 3DS. In response, Nintendo did what we all wished for but never could have expected. They dropped the price, mere months after launch. And not just by 50 bucks either, but 80! With the new $170 SKU, sales jumped by 260%. Things still weren't where they should have been due to the sparse lineup of games that year, but then everything changed. That November saw the release of Super Mario 3D Land and the sales just about exploded. After a very strong holiday season, the 3DS finally had the momentum it needed, and thanks to its growing library, it sold well for years. I hope I'm not the only one seeing the potential parallels between the 3DS and the Switch. You've got a system releasing in the unusual month of March, well after Christmas, with a somewhat less than ideal launch window, and a Mario coming during the first holiday season. I believe that the 3DS's initial sales woes weren't just a blunder that Nintendo was lucky enough to recover from. I think they got a lot out of the experience and that they're applying what they learned to the launch of the Switch. Here's what I think Nintendo just might be doing. A traditional November launch of a console goes something like this. The console releases, and during the busiest shopping season of the year, stock is obviously limited. The die-hard fans who planned on buying on day one are competing with the people who are only up for getting such a pricey item for Christmas, whether because of budget reasons or simply because they prefer to take advantage of holiday deals and bundles. At no other time of the year will the console see these sales numbers, and every decision a company has made about its system's launch is in effect. This is a point of no return. The Christmas sales are gonna be what they're gonna be, even if said company made some huge blunder with the launch. See the Xbox One launch. Then once January rolls around, anyone who likes to buy during the holidays but wasn't quite swayed by the launch lineup, well, they're likely committed to not buying the system until next Christmas at the earliest. And of course, during this whole thing, if there happen to be one or more other hot consoles on the market competing for that sweet Christmas cash, any launch that's less than stellar runs the risk of being shoved aside. Like I said, what Nintendo's doing can't exactly be called a soft launch, seeing as we're looking at a very official worldwide release date of March 3rd with a lot of marketing behind it, but I think the general idea is largely the same. Basically, by releasing in March, Nintendo avoids all that holiday pressure and competition. Just about everybody surmised this much, seeing as it's obvious that the Switch could have managed to launch a mere 4 months earlier if Nintendo had really wanted it to. But it goes a little deeper than just avoiding competition from Sony and Microsoft. A spring release means that there's more stock to go around, because the system is pretty much exclusively being picked up by those die-hard fans who want to hop on board nice and early. Even without counting the fact that pre-orders were snatched up pretty much instantly, we know that those fans historically show up in good numbers. Even the 3DS with its initially low value proposition and the Wii U with its overall floundering nature had great day one sales. So after that first batch of stock is gone, the rest of the year is about working out kinks and building momentum. Nintendo's last few systems have launched without a few key features, so now they've got time to get all the services they're going to offer not only up and running, but tested and refined. They can set up all their premium online features and whatnot and make sure everything is perfect before it sees a huge influx of players. And while I think a price drop is extremely unlikely, this early launch offers a tiny bit of insurance. If after launch the numbers just completely tank as they did with the 3DS and Nintendo sees that their price really is just a little too high for the average consumer, they at least have the admittedly drastic price drop option available to them. And if that's what's needed, they can get it out of the way earlier in the year and not screw up a whole holiday season with their fine-tuning. Then of course the rest of the year is also about building that library. There might not be any gigantic AAA third-party exclusives, but there are a lot of really good third-party games coming to the system. Fast RMX will attract F-Zero fans who didn't get a Wii U. Yooka-Laylee is sure to feel right at home on a Nintendo system. Skyrim's a fun one. Minecraft, that's a pretty big deal. Then you've got Mario Kart, which has always been a system seller, and Splatoon, which was probably the freshest and most exciting exclusive to come out of the Wii U. With each release, the Switch will look better and better, and between continued marketing efforts and a growing install base, it will begin to really establish its place in the market. Sales might still be a little on the low side during these months, but that public image will continue to grow. Then, come November, the Switch party will get started in here. When Mario finally came to the 3DS, it was, in my opinion, the first piece of truly compelling exclusive software for the system, and that alone was enough to drive those sales to a huge degree. But when Super Mario Odyssey launches on the Switch right at the beginning of the holiday season, I mean, think about it. This is the Switch's first Christmas, but instead of the standard OK launch with a small handful of games, now you've got a system with Zelda, and Mario Kart, and Splatoon, and everything else that's been released over the previous 8 months. This is the true launch of the Switch, when the general public really starts to jump on board. There's the huge amount of people who specifically want one for Christmas, or just want a Christmas deal, plus all the people who were always interested in the system but wanted to wait until it had more games, and none of them have to compete for stock with those day one enthusiasts. All of that momentum Nintendo spent the year building rockets the Switch into a fantastic first holiday season, and as far as building both consumer and retailer relationships goes, that's a heck of an important task to accomplish. It will be the big splash that ripples into 2018 and beyond. Would things have been even better with a lower price tag? Sure. In fact, I think a $250 Switch would have sold roughly 1 trillion units come Christmas time, but even at $300, we're looking at a great first year for the system. Plus, like I said, that price might be something of a test. If the Switch does well at its current MSRP, then we know that the inevitable price drop a few years down the road will give it another gargantuan boost, and at that point, the thing will be selling like stinking hotcakes. And even though they ended up selling the 3DS at something of a loss after its price drop, it probably wasn't much of a loss. For one, they said it would only take a year before the parts became cheap enough to manufacture for them to make money on each unit again. Secondly, yeah, sales might have dried up after that initial launch, but they sold more than 3.5 million units at that $250 price. I know it's more complicated than this, and retailers get some profit too and all that, but just for a very rough figure, let's multiply 3.5 million by that $80 that was later cut. That's $288 million, over $250 million netted from the day oneers. Based on the hype the Switch has been generating, Nintendo is heavily motivated to make a good chunk of change on each unit. Because seriously, that hype is there. Opinions may be split among the vocal internet populace, but no one can deny that Nintendo has done something special here. They've caught the attention of some of their older fans, the ones who've been out of touch with Nintendo for a whole generation, or even 2 or 3. This whole slightly awkward March launch with its sparse lineup may seem weird, but I think it's all a part of the plan, and Nintendo's looking at the long game. I think this Christmas, it's going to be mighty hard to find a Switch. My question for you today is, when do you plan on buying? Are you waiting for that Mario-fueled momentum this Christmas, or are you a day oneer like this guy? Because you better believe I've got my pre-order all set. March 3rd, I'll be doing exactly one thing, and that's playing Breath of the Wild, in my bed, in my jams, and nothing is gonna stop me. See you later!